Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we're going to talk about the favorite episodes that we watch for our comfort watch. But before we get into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Lynn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University, and my main research area is the psychology of fandom. I am a huge fan of Supernatural from the very beginning. I've written, I think, 6 books on the show, the most recent 2 written with the actors of the show who wrote their own chapters about what their experience has been like making this favorite show of all of ours.
Okay, Beth.
My credentials are not nearly as exciting as Lynn's, but I'm Beth Dolgner. I write paranormal cozy mysteries and romantic urban fantasy. Emphasis on that cozy part, which is why talking about comfort episodes fits right in with what I do.
Okay. And I'm Gail Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. Unlike Lynn, I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in a few months so I could be ready for the start of season 12, fell down the rabbit hole and proudly claimed the title of obsessed fan. So, Supernatural is maybe for many people an odd choice of a comfort show. Two guys fighting monsters, multiple apocalypses, which I think is a word that isn't supposed to have a plural, but it does in our world. Heaven, hell, all kinds of stuff. And yet it's our comfort watch. So before we get into the specific episodes, how did that happen? Why does it work, Lynn?
I mean, I think it partly works just because of the whole psychology behind the fact that when you have fictional characters who you love and who you spend a lot of time with, they actually become comfort people to you. You actually develop an attachment relationship. It's a parasocial relationship. It's an uneven relationship because obviously we love the fictional characters and they cannot love us back because they're fictional characters, but that doesn't really matter. Our brains, when we see the same faces all the time, we develop a real attachment to them. And that means because it's an attachment relationship, that we feel really good being with them. We feel safe, we feel protected, we feel a sense of belongingness. It's almost like having like your best friends in your living room or your family members in your living room when we invite Sam and Dean and Cass and the other characters into our living room. So it really is a comfort show for us because of that familiarity and our affection for those characters.
Okay, Beth?
Yeah, certainly those characters do begin to feel like friends, maybe even family to a certain extent. And for me, I think that there's just a lot of comfort in knowing how it's all going to end when you're going into it. There are only a handful of shows that I've watched multiple times, but there are many movies that I watch, many books that I read over and over and over again. And I do it because I know how it ends. I don't have to worry that the cute dog introduced in chapter 2 is going to die in chapter 21. And I think with Supernatural, the good guys eventually win. It might take a while to get there, and sometimes it's not pretty in the process, but I know that like everything's going to be okay at the end of the day. And I think there's a lot of comfort in that, and especially when I'm going through something, it's like, okay, you know what? They, even though they're fictional, it's like, well, they dealt with this and got through it. I can do the same thing in my life.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think no matter what we're dealing with, watching Sam and Dean face down the apocalypse again and win boosts, if they can face down Lucifer, if they can face down God, if they can face down the powers of hell, well, I can deal with whatever's going wrong in my life. It's a very encouraging to see them win against these bigger, badder, more powerful influences. And I think also for those of us who may have grown up with around people who believed in a literal Armageddon, a literal apocalypse, um, it's very nice to see those things defeated. It's kind of like watching someone skewer your childhood fears and triumph over it. So I know that's a subset of viewers, but maybe not a small a subset as you might think. Um, and so that is a real comfort too, that, hey, I was brought up to think this stuff was inevitable and they beat it. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Um, what makes a comfort episode? Because I think we're probably going to name some that people might go, really? You find that comforting? Before we get into those details, what is it about an episode that makes it a comfort episode? Lynn?
Well, having made my list of my comfort episodes, it seems like what they have in common is there's some humor in them, because when I want a comfort episode, I do want, and people might be like, what? Humor in Supernatural? It's like a tragic horror show, but there was a ton of humor in it, and it has very, very talented writers and actors who can really do humor well. So most of the ones that I picked as comfort episodes that I go back to again and again and again have some humor in them. The second thing seems to be a lot of my comfort episodes are the so-called meta episodes, because I just personally love when the show gets meta, when it incorporates little insider wink wink nudge nudges to its fans, to its cast, to its crew. I think that really plays up the sense of belongingness that the fandom feels. We are all sort of a community, the SPN family, and the meta episodes really celebrate the existence of that SPN family by lampooning and, affectionately poking fun at everything and everyone, including the fans. So that feels good and comforting to me. Um, I think those are kind of the main two things. But the third thing that probably creeps into the ones I picked is what you just said, both of you, the ones that have happy endings. So maybe in the course of the episode, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of tragedy, there might be, somebody almost dying, maybe even dying because it's supernatural. But in the end, that kind of always keep fighting mantra plays out. And in the end, Sam and Dean prevail and there's some kind of happy ending. So I think those are the three things that stick out to me in my comfort episodes.
Okay, Beth?
It's interesting because I also made a list of some of my favorites, and it wasn't until Lynn was talking about it that I realized a lot of the episodes I listed are the meta ones as well. And I think that was almost like a subconscious thing that I gravitate toward those episodes. I also tend to like the more, I don't know if I want to say humorous necessarily so much as ridiculous. Like the more silly an episode is, the more it's a comfort for me, with one caveat, which is one of the things that Supernatural always did so well is that they would kind of lure you in with something that seems silly and fun and get you off your guard, and then they would absolutely break your heart. Like I cannot, one of you will probably remember the episode name, but the one with the imaginary friend.
Just my imagination.
Yes, thank you. It started out so silly and so cute, and then wound up just being an absolute tearjerker. So I think you have to choose carefully when it comes to the more, ridiculous or silly themes in Supernatural, because they can really turn quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of episodes that I think are masterpiece episodes or that are absolute linchpins to the overall story arc of a season or of the show, and that were, crafted so well. Many of those leave you in a small sobbing puddle on the floor, and that's what they were designed to do. And if I'm in a certain kind of mood, I can watch that, especially if I'm not watching it by itself, if I'm watching a run of a couple of episodes. But if I just want a pick-me-up, if I'm just going to drop in and watch an episode for comfort, then yes, I'm going to go for ones with humor, or I'm going to go for ones that are, as they often were in the earlier days of the show, a case thick. that didn't have world-ending stakes, that weren't balancing heaven and hell and the end of reality and gods and monsters. Well, maybe monsters, but not gods. They weren't that big yet. The scale wasn't that big. And so since we knew it was all going to work out, nobody was going to die, watching that over again, it's kind of like watching your favorite mystery movie. You know how it ends, and so you can just sit back and enjoy seeing your favorite characters at work, as well as the funny ones, because you got to love the funny ones. So let's get into some of those favorites. Lynn, give us one and let us know why.
I mean, my number one, the one that I have gone back to many more times than any other, so I have to make it number one, is The French Mistake. Yes, it's a masterpiece, but it's also a meta episode. It's also a hilarious episode. It's kind of got a happy ending, so it sort of hits all of those boxes. I love the meta in it. It spoofs just about everything. It spoofs Jared and Jensen. It spoofs Bob Singer, the director. It spoofs the cinematographer, Serge, who's so brilliant. Like, Kripke himself is spoofed in it. Like, they really poked fun at themselves so much, going back to little tiny things that they knew their audience would understand. Because by the time season 6 rolled around, Robbie Thompson, Ben Edlund, who wrote this episode, understood that the fandom knows almost as much about the crew and the showrunner as they did about the characters in the show. So you've got, it's completely ridiculous. It's Jared and Jensen playing Sam and Dean, playing Jared and Jensen playing Sam and Dean. It's like, who does that? And yet it works so perfectly, and there's so many hilarious sections to it. The funniest one, the scene that I have a little YouTube video that's just this scene, which sometimes I just watch anyway, is the bad acting scene. Jared,
There's
Jensen,
a key. There has to be a lock.
If there's a lock, there must be a key. All of them. Jared, Jensen, and Misha, like, no one can ever say that they are not incredibly talented at comedy, because I've seen that scene probably 100 times. It doesn't matter. I laugh my ass off every single time I watch that scene, because it is just so well done and so hilarious. There's just all these little shout outs, there's Jared in The French Mistake is married to fake Ruby, and they have alpacas, the greenest animal. And there's a big painting of Jared riding a horse because he's egotistical. And Jensen was in Days of Our Lives, and there's a little clip of him on the soap. It's all these different shout outs that the fandom will get every single one of them. And the actors, while they have said that they were nervous about it, Jared and Jensen actually did a rare thing and kind of said, are we jumping the shark here? Can we see this script? Do we really know what we're doing? But they all came to really absolutely love it. And I really think Ben Edlund is just a brilliant writer. So that's my number one.
Okay. Beth, what's your number one?
My number one is probably going to sound a little weird, but it's the pilot episode for me. And I mean, anybody who's been on a Supernatural panel with me, I always say that I loved the X-Files so much. And when that show ended, I had an X-shaped hole in my heart. I was just so sad. And so when I heard that Kim Manners was working on a new project about these two brothers that went and hunted supernatural creatures, I was like, yeah, all right, I'll give this a shot. And I watched the pilot episode when it first aired and just absolutely fell in love with it. And there was even an X-Files joke in the pilot episode. And I was like, yes, this is my show. So when I go back and rewatch the pilot, I still get that same feeling of like, oh, okay, this is it. This is my show. This is my thing. And you have that now, going back and watching it, that kind of anticipation of like, we're taking off on a ride that's going to last us for 15 years. So you get that sort of feeling of anticipation and excitement. And it's a great episodic episode. There's just that kind of that one storyline. They go and get rid of the bad thing, and drive off into the sunset. And so it's very easy to watch the pilot as just a standalone episode and go back to it. So yeah, for me, it's all wrapped up in those memories of how I felt the first time I saw that show.
That's on my list too, Beth.
Mhm. And those are both absolutely great episodes. So I'm going to go with The Real Ghostbusters. This is where Sam and Dean show up because Becky calls them and it sounds like an emergency. And it is actually a supernatural convention at this lodge, except there is a real ghost. And they find this out after they confront all these people that are dressed like Sam and Dean, calling each other Sam and Dean, and bitch and jerk, and doing all these things. And they're just horrified. Like Dean wants to shoot them. He, are they possessed? Do we shoot people? And of course, as it goes on, there is a real haunting. And these two guys, Damien and I can't think of the other guy's name, Barnes, help them out, even though they're cosplaying Sam and Dean, and they actually do lend a hand. And it turns out that Damien and Barnes are together. And but what really makes the episode is when they tell Dean that he's so lucky. He says, I have a shitty life. Why would you want to dress up like us? We, who have a really crappy life. And they said, you have a brother who would die for you. Who wouldn't want that? And that moment when Dean sees himself and he and Sam in a different light through someone else's lens is really special. And besides that, the episode is just funny. And watching Dean be so horrified at the whole thing, Sam kind of takes it in stride, but Dean is just mortified. It's beautifully comedic. It has that twist of having a real ghost that they need to deal with. But it's that's one I can always watch and feel good. Back to you, Lynn.
That's on my list too. So we're all agreeing here. This is a tie, but I'll just go with the one that I thought of first, which is Baby, which is a season 11 episode. So one of the later seasons episode, but a Robbie Thompson episode, another masterpiece. So unique because the whole episode is from the point of view of a car, and who does that? That's also preposterous. But what the writers and everyone understood early on is that the car, the Impala, Dean's baby, is a character in the show for us and beloved by all of us and beloved by the real life people who make the show. So it's a feel good episode just because it's focused on Baby and from her perspective. But it's also a feel good episode because it does something that Robbie Thompson had been saying for years that he wanted to do, which is focus part of an episode. And he wanted to do more of it. And I wish he had done more, but he wanted to focus an episode on like just the daily, everyday life of Sam and Dean, of their nomadic existence in the car, which was their home. So we get, the brothers sleeping in the car, which they must have done a million times. They're so comfortable with it, folding their 6 foot plus giant bodies into the seats of the car and arranging themselves so that they can talk. And then we just get this lovely intimate scene of them actually talking. It felt so good at the time because the brothers had been at odds off and on for the seasons before that. So just seeing them be honest with each other, talking about their childhood, not being defensive, sharing their feelings, and then ending it with good night, bitch, good night, jerk, which we hadn't gotten a bitch and jerk in a long, like literally years. The Supernatural fandom is such a patient fandom. We have to wait years and years and years between the times we get those wonderful little things. So that was lovely. It's also got that great scene of Sam and Dean singing to Night Moves after they've had some downtime. And it's like early seasons, a return to early seasons with Dean being like so proud of his little brother for like getting some in the back seat. It's like the return of old Dean, who we haven't seen in a while. It's also got that hilarious scene of Dean decapitating the monster of the week, and the head ends up on Baby's dashboard, and Baby just turns on her windshield wipers and it goes flying. I mean, just so well done. We've got Dean in short shorts, which we didn't see in the actual episode, washing baby. We've got the army men in the ashtray and the Legos and the initials. It's just the green cooler, like everything's there. It's meant to be a sentimental episode, and it really is. And then, even though they go through a lot of violent things happen, Dean gets to do a reverse 180. That was really hot. And in the end, there's a happy ending. The lady is reunited with her kids. She's back to herself. Dean is reunited with Sam. She helps her kids to the car. Dean helps Sam to the car. You know, they're back home. And I think for me, the episode is also made more of a comfort episode because Jared and Jensen love it so much. And I've heard them talk about it so, so much that they loved. It was just the two of them in the car, and the director would say, go, and they took off in baby with the cameras running. They did their own slates. There was nobody with them. They just did it themselves, and it was such a unique experience for them too. I love to hear them talk about how much they loved it too. So yeah, big comfort episode for me.
Okay. Beth?
I love that episode as well. And
Mhm.
I think it's kind of like with the French Mistake, the writing, I mean, just the the fact that the writers were able to pull off something that was so unusual, to do that perspective, I think is just incredible. And obviously the execution, of the idea was well done. But so one of my absolute favorite comfort watches for Supernatural is Weekend at Bobby's. Um, I, for a lot of reasons, partly because I just love Bobby Singer so much, and seeing like a sort of a grumpy, disgruntled Bobby is even better because there's just something more heartwarming about him when he's a little annoyed. I don't know why. Um, but before the boys got the bunker and really had like a home base, I always thought of Bobby's house as kind of as sort of their home away from home. That was the place they could go and feel safe. That was the place that they could go and it was familiar to them. It wasn't just yet another motel room on the road. And so anytime that an episode took us to Bobby's house was fun for me, just being there. I want to explore that house. I want to go through all the piles of junk that he's got in those rooms, and not junk, sorry, potential research for future cases piled up in the corners. And so I think his house just always gave me a feeling of warmth and comfort, but also of curiosity. I want to know more about it. I want to know more about all the stuff that's in it and all the stories that are to be told in that house. So that's just a really fun episode for me to watch.
Okay. I'm going to go with fan fiction, which is the musical episode. And this is where Sam and Dean get called in. They think it's a case. It turns out that there is a high school that is doing a musical version of Supernatural based on the script written by one of the students. And, she gets poetic about how Supernatural has life and death and all of these things. And it's funny, it's meta. Jared and Jensen do so well pretending, being Sam and Dean, being absolutely horrified that their life has been turned into a musical. I mean, it's a little flattering, but no, it's really horrifying. And you have that wonderful moment at the end when the cast of the musical sings Carry On. And you can see it dawn on Sam and Dean for maybe the first time how that song describes them. And you see that in their expression. And I thought that was just such a great piece of acting for both of them as you see that awareness dawn in something that they probably heard that song a million times, but they never really thought of it in the same way. And so, and it's fun to watch them. It's fun to watch the school kids do the play. And, at one point, Sam is tackling the monster in the background, and everybody just thinks it's part of the play. So I thought that was just done so well. And Jared and Jensen play it so straight. But it's really such a humorous episode. And again, it ends well. Everybody's happy. There's nothing bad going on immediately at the end, which you can't always say in Supernatural. Lynn?
That was the other one that was tied for baby for me that I had trouble. I have a different one, but that I'll go to next. But I also love about fan fiction. The other reason it's a comfort show is because, again, Robbie Thompson, such a brilliant writer, but the whole sort of premise of that episode, and it came at a time when fandom was already starting to be contentious and there were ship wars starting, and I was really dismayed about that. And I loved what the episode had to say. There was an affectionate shout out to all the ships, not just one, but all of them, the main ships, that they're all okay. Everybody's interpretation is okay. That's the journey that Sam and Dean go on, from there's no singing in Supernatural and that's not what Supernatural's about, to this is Marie's Supernatural. I want you to stand as close as she wants you to. I want you to put as much sub into that text as you can. Like, there is explicit shout out to the various ships and to fans, various, all kinds of interpretations of the show, and like the permission to say, that's okay with us. That's your interpretation, and we are behind your interpretation. I every time I watch it, I think, if only fandom could like go with this too and be as okay with each other as the show is with all of them. But it puts me in a feel good mood. I'll go with the first true meta episode, which was Hollywood Babylon, all the way back in season 2. So the show, it was a huge risk. And I remember at the time, people were quite shocked that they had done this kind of an episode, especially because it took a lot of jabs at the industry and producers that we know now came out of Supernatural's like real experience. The producers were trying to force them to make the show less dark. They literally wanted them to brighten it. That found its way into the script. So all of those little in jokes, I think, are hilarious. There's a part where the boys go on a set tour and they talk about the Gilmore Girls, and Sam jumps off the tram because, of course, Jared was on Gilmore Girls, and there's jokes about being in Canada. It's just, again, all those little in jokes are really fun. There's also some interesting insight into Dean that we get and how he's so good at morphing into whatever he needs to be, whatever role he needs to play, and that's really one of his skills, and how smart he is to be able to do that. And lastly, I think it's very scary. There's that scene of that, it's a real horror episode too. There's that scene of that producer being slowly dragged toward that giant fan and knowing what's going to happen to him. That's terrifying. I remember screaming when I watched that the first time and kind of being like, ah. And that's part of what Supernatural is about too. And I love the ending where Sam and Dean walk into the sunset and then it rolls away and you see that it's just a backdrop. Again, brilliant, brilliant meta episode.
Okay. How about you, Beth?
I really love Lark and the Real Girl. Partly because Charlie is just, I mean, she's a fan favorite for a reason. It's just fun seeing how bright and bubbly Felicia Day made that character. But also I did like Renaissance reenactment groups in college, and like we used to go and like camp at the Florida Renaissance Festival. I worked at the Georgia Renaissance Festival. So any of that kind of stuff, I love seeing a story set in those kinds of environments. And I think they did a good job of really building up the sort of the intrigue. I mean, that one almost plays out more like a mystery than a typical Supernatural episode does, because they have to figure out who's behind everything that's going on. And it was just fun seeing Sam and Dean's reactions to being in this very unfamiliar and for them uncomfortable environment with the costumes and the role playing. And it was just a lot of fun, but still a very well told story. And that's when I can always go back to, and just everything I might be stressing out about just slips away because I am just so into that great little LARP world that they've created for this episode.
Okay. Scooby Natural. I have been a Scooby-Doo fan since Scooby-Doo came on the air. Scooby-Doo was my go-to comfort watch before I fell in love with Supernatural. I could, and my family can tell you this, I could put in a VHS or a DVD and just let it run in the background, and I was perfectly happy with that as my white noise with whatever else I was doing, because I loved what Scooby, I knew Scooby and the gang would always be okay. And so to see Supernatural do an homage to Scooby-Doo and do it so well. It wasn't mocking, it wasn't derisive, it wasn't, they did it well. They did both the supernatural element and the Scooby-Doo element respectfully for the storylines and the properties and the characters. And I was very appreciative of that they didn't make fun of the Scooby-Doo property or not treat it well, but it was treated very well. And Sam and Dean even talked about how, hey, wherever Dad dragged us, you could turn on TV and there was Scooby. And so that one, of course, it all ends well. It's kind of one of those bubble episodes that doesn't really have a lot to do with what comes before it or after it. The world isn't ending in the moment. And so that one is just a great one to watch because there's nothing about it to drag you back down. Lynn?
Another one that I know the actors had so much fun doing and love so much
Oh,
too.
they must have.
Yeah, they've talked about it a lot. And that always adds to my enjoyment of an episode when I know that they really love doing it as much as they did. Well, this is going to be one that probably no one else would have on their list of comfort episodes, but it fits in with criteria number 3 of what makes a comfort episode for me, and that is Red Meat in season 11. It is sort of the quintessential for me episode of what Supernatural is about. It's about the brothers' codependence, which I'm a huge fan of, the lengths they'll go to in order to save each other. They are both incredibly badass in it, which is something that I also love about the Winchesters. And there's a happy ending after all kinds of suffering and tragedy and horror and very realistic suffering. And it sort of embodies that always keep fighting spirit. I mean, what Sam goes through being very, very, very nearly dead and looking like, honestly, like he should have been dead about a dozen times over the course of the episode. But every time he manages to drag himself up and bring himself back. And it's because in the end, he is the one who's going to save Dean. And meanwhile, Dean is going to the greatest length you could possibly go to try to make a deal to get Death to bring Sam back. So it's not like a feel good episode in the sense that the others are. It's absolutely agonizing at times to watch. Jared Padalecki in particular just does such an amazing job portraying Sam's pain that you can feel it. Like you're suffering right along with him. But in some ways, that makes his persistence all the more inspiring, and it makes that eventual happy ending all the more powerful. It's happy ending after tragedy, and that's just like the show. And that's what I love about it. I never wanted it to be anything that it wasn't. There's a lot of suffering and a lot of tragedy, but there's also this incredible, inspiring persistence. And I just feel like that episode embodies that.
Okay. How about you, Beth?
So I also had Scooby Natural on my list, and I just want to add to what you said because I'm also a huge Scooby-Doo fan. I blame the fact that I'm a paranormal cozy mystery writer on the fact that I was raised on a healthy diet of Scooby-Doo and Bunnicula stories, and so I feel like even though it's just a cartoon, like it's really kind of shaped the sort of things I like and the sort of things I do for a living. And so to see that merged with my favorite TV show was so much fun. And I like you said, Gail, I feel like they treated both properties with a great deal of reverence. So they both, it was just a great mashup. And it made me think, of course, of all those old Scooby-Doo episodes where you would have the guest stars, like when the Harlem Globetrotters would be the guest star, Sonny and Cher. So it made me think of that, like, oh, well, this week on Scooby-Doo, Sam and Dean Winchester are guest stars. And so it was just a really fun throwback. And I'm sure that there are a lot of us in that Supernatural demographic who grew up watching Scooby-Doo and felt exactly the same way. And it's kind of nice knowing that we're all just sitting in front of our TVs, grinning ear to ear, watching that episode.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, I'm going to add a very supernatural Christmas. Probably the strangest Christmas episode ever. You know, you've got ancient gods who are taking sacrifices, but they look like something out of a Hallmark movie. And, you know, magic. And it was just done so well. And it turned the whole let's do a holiday episode idea kind of upside down, because nothing says Christmas like getting your fingernails pulled out. But it did pay homage to the actual holidays, old pagan roots that were not fluffy and marshmallows and, you know, singing choirs. And all of this wrapped up in a suburban house with these people in over-the-top Christmas sweaters who are trying to kill them. It was just quintessentially supernatural. And it ends, you know, there's the tension on Dean's deal is coming due. He wants to have a real Christmas. And Sam's so lost in his own pain about this that he doesn't think he can do it. But then he does. This scraggly tree that he probably cut down in the motel parking lot, the air fresheners and the fishing bobbers that are hung off of it. And then that prank Jared pulled on Jensen where the eggnog is seriously spiked, and that spit take that Jensen does is Jensen going, whoa, shit, there's really a lot of alcohol in this. And they just played it straight through. You know, every time I watch it, I just love that episode more. Lynn?
Yeah, that was on my list too. And I love the last scene of that. One of the most beautifully shot scenes in the series of the brothers in the motel finally having their little very Winchester Christmas. And you can see through the window, it's snowing outside and the Christmas lights are on. They're reflecting in baby's kind of gleaming black raindropped, you know, sleek black coat. It just gorgeous, gorgeous last scene. We watch that every Christmas, and I think it's become even more of a comfort episode because now I also associate it with Christmas because the whole family watches it every Christmas time too. So it's become an unlikely sort of Christmas holiday tradition too, which adds to the comfort showness of it. This is probably an odd one to pick too, but I do rewatch this sometimes for the humor in it. It's Bad Day at Black Rock in season 3. It's a pretty dark episode, and it comes at season 3 is a very dark season, so it's not like there's anything really light about it, but in the midst of all the very real darkness, and there's some real horrific horror scenes in it too, there's some really hilarious humorous moments. There's, you know, Dean when he gets the rabbit foot and is able to do these absolutely unlikely things with a pen and, you know, just I'm Batman, and his just glee, and Sam's like, you're Batman. I mean, nailed it. Sam's I lost my shoe, and when he just falls down right out of frame, and Dean's like exasperated, like I'm so worried about my brother, but also like this is just ridiculous that this 6.5 foot grown man is losing his shoe and tripping over nothing and skinning his knees. And then the best scene, which I also have a little YouTube video of, so I can just watch that scene, when Sam is supposed to stay in the chair in the motel room to keep himself safe and out of danger because he's cursed, and the air conditioner catches on fire, and he's just like, you got to be kidding me. And then the curtains catch on fire, and he's trying to put it out, and he eventually just like knocks himself out. And the bad guys who tracked him down are watching on the other side, looking through the window where Sam takes himself out, and are just like, are you kidding me? I could just watch those humorous scenes from that episode again and again and again. It's again, these actors so talented with the comedy. It just, yeah. So weird one to pick, but it is really hilarious outside of those dark portions.
Very good. Beth?
Lynn was talking about how good they are with the comedic scenes, and it's is it Yellow Fever where Dean is scared of everything? Yes. His facial expressions and timing for that stuff, but also the way Sam reacts to his fear and is kind of like, really, dude, come on. I just think that is just, I mean, those are scenes. I don't have to watch the whole episode. I can just go watch select scenes and I'm in a better mood already. So I think that is one of the reasons that I like some of the funnier episodes so much, is because they do just make me feel better, because both of them are so good at the comedic timing and really pulling off those scenes. I think we have pretty much gone through most of the ones I go back to again and again and again. I would say probably the only one we haven't mentioned yet is Mystery Spot. Um, it's just a fun, goofy episode. Really, any of those early Trickster episodes were fun ones to watch, just because you never knew what was going to happen and what the kind of surprise twist was going to be. But yeah, I'm one of those people. I will watch the same episode again and again and again. So my list of comfort watches is very short.
I'm going to throw in to round us out Frontierland. Sam and Dean go back to the Old West to try to get the colt from Samuel Colt. And you have Dean so excited that he's going to go back to the real cowboys. And he's got a serape and he looks like he lifted Clint Eastwood's wardrobe from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And everybody keeps going, nice blanket. And so by the end of the episode, Dean's gone through like 3 wardrobe changes to be more authentic, because, well, he didn't look like Marshall Dillon and he didn't look like Clint Eastwood. So, but it plays with all those Wild West tropes. Jared and Jensen both grew up in Texas. Darn well they know how to ride a horse, but there's this scene when Sam is riding away and Dean is just watching him go, and that is the most awkward sitting on a horse I've ever seen, because Jensen's just not, Jared's just not moving with the horse. He's bouncing, and Dean gets this pained look on his face, like, oh, that's gonna hurt. And you know Jared knows how, at least the basics of riding a horse. So just little touches like that. And when Dean is in the saloon and the singing girl comes up to him, and there's a really large lesion on her lips, and he's going, yeah, not like in the movies. This is just not turning out to be his thing. And it plays on so many of those, any of us who grew up watching the Westerns on TV or in the movies, it played on all of those tropes, turned them upside down. And it was just, very well done and defying expectations, because it could have gone a million other ways, and it went the right one. And so that was just a lot of fun. Well, folks, we've gone through our time and apparently our lists. So thank you so much for being here. Hope everybody watching got some suggestions of what to watch when you're not in a good mood, because Supernatural is always a good comfort show. And before we wrap up, please let us know where we can find you online. Lynn?
You can find me on all social media at Fangasm SPN. You can find the books that are written with the Supernatural actors, Family Don't End with Blood, and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done. They're at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon, but you can also find all the information about them and which actors wrote chapters on the website, peacewhenyouaredone.com.
Okay. Beth?
And you can find me at bethdolgner.com. There are links there to all of my social media, as well as all of my books.
I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on all the major social medias under one or both of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. And I also run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, as well as the Supernatural track here on Continual. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.